Hi, I'm Missy with On William Street, and this week we are going back to the basics. Today we're going to talk about 1/4 inch seams. And you might be wondering, why is this important? My sewing machine has a 1/4 inch foot, or I've got the line, so it's not a problem. This isn't a big deal, not something I need to worry about. But you'd actually be surprised. There's a lot of machines your 1/4 inch might not be exactly a 1/4 inch. And if you really want to make sure that all of your blocks line up on your quilt, you want to make sure that you really do have a true 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so we're going to first test and see how close our machine's 1/4 inch seam really is. So right here we've got our line. It's a 1/4 inch. We also have a 1/4 inch foot on here. So if you push this down, it should be, it's right there on that line. But we're going to see how close that really truly is. So we're just going to take a couple pieces of fabric, line them right up on that 1/4 inch line, and sew. These pieces we started off with 3.5 inches wide, so we want to make sure, so we can see, got our ruler, we're right here at 3.5 inches. So now we need to iron our seam, and then we're going to do some measuring to make sure that our 1/4 inch seam is really true a 1/4 inch seam. Now that our seam is ironed, we can go ahead and measure this, and because we started off with 3.5 inches on each side, we should have a 1/4 inch seam in there, so we should have a block that is now 6.5 inches wide. And we are right there, right on that 6.5 inch mark. So our 1/4 inch foot is right on. But we want to go ahead and go over some ideas and some things that if your 1/4 inch foot is not right on, some things that you can do to help that. So one easy way to really double check on your 1/4 inch seam to make sure that if it's not quite right, to have a guide line up, or this is actually even nice if you've got somebody that is learning how to sew and needs something a little bit darker or a little bit more visible than that little 1/4 inch seam. It's really easy. Go ahead, you can get some washi tape, masking tape, painter's tape works great, and you're just going to take a piece of that tape, do your measurements, and then you're just going to line that up right there. And then as you sew and you follow along this line all the way up, that will help keep your seam right where it needs to be. Another thing, if your machine allows, this one doesn't, so we can actually show you, is a lot of machines let you move the needle one way or another. So if it's off just a little bit and you don't really want to deal with measuring it out and putting the tape on, when you've done your test to find out exactly which needle position gives you that 1/4 inch seam, then you can just make a note of that and make sure that you're moving your needle to that spot every time that you sew. So another thing that we like to use when we're sewing to watch our 1/4 inch is a 1/4 inch foot. So you can see the differences between these two feet. This one is just a regular foot. So you've got the width is the same all the way down. A 1/4 inch foot. This one, it comes down, it's got the same width up above, but then it's going to narrow down here on the bottom. Also with like the Bernina, the 1/4 inch foot has a little kind of bar all the way down on the side to help you as you're guiding your fabric through your machine to stay on that 1/4 inch. So this is something that really comes in handy as you're doing a lot of quilting. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is some patterns are going to call for a scant 1/4 inch. So you don't want to follow your 1/4 inch seam when it's calling for a scant, because that's going to end up being a larger seam than what you want. And if you notice, when we fold our fabric over after we've completed that seam and we pressed it, you've got a little bit of bulk that comes in with the thread and the fabric in there. So what you would use for a 1/4 inch, a scant 1/4 inch seam, is when you've got something that you need to have exactly at a 1/4 inch after it's been folded and pressed and everything, or if you've got something that needs to be just a little bit smaller than that 1/4 inch for the patterns to fit together. So when you're doing a scant, you're going to want to follow your 1/4 inch seam line on your sewing machine, but go just a little bit of a hair on the side so that you can decrease that. So not quite an eighth, of an inch. Don't get quite that tight, but you want to just barely to the side of that 1/4 inch seam to just make that just a touch smaller when it calls for that scant 1/4 inch. So the next time one of your quilt blocks just is not lining up, it's just not coming together like it's supposed to, think about it. It might not be you. It might be your 1/4 inch seam. So go ahead, take a moment, test your machine, test your 1/4 inch, make sure that it really is a true 1/4 inch seam. Use some of these methods to help keep things lined up. The tape along the side is also always a great method, or if you've got a 1/4 inch foot and if it is giving you a true 1/4 inch seam, that's definitely our go-to tool when we're putting quilts and blocks together. And make sure to follow us on YouTube so that you don't miss any of our videos. We are releasing videos every week. We want to help to share our tips and tricks and to help you guys become better quilters along with us, because sometimes we always forget that some of these basics, we got to go back to the basics to really build and grow, to get those seams and get everything lined up just the way we want to. And we'll see you next week.